Hey everyone, it's MusicTechHelpGuy, and in this video, I'm going to show you how you can use the Novation LAUNCHPAD as a control surface for live loops in Logic Pro. And I'll also go over some of its MIDI controller functions in the Notes and Chords modes. In Logic 10.7, support was added for the entire LAUNCHPAD line. So here I'm using a LAUNCHPAD Pro Mark III, but this video should be applicable to other devices in the LAUNCHPAD line as well. Just some of the placement of the buttons might be a bit different. When you plug in your LAUNCHPAD, Logic should automatically set it up as a control surface. If you want to check this, you can go up to Logic Pro, go down to Control Surfaces, and then go to Setup. From here, you can double check that the LAUNCHPAD Pro is selected and set up as a control surface. If you don't see it here, go up to New, select Automatic Installation, and then plug in your LAUNCHPAD, and it should automatically detect it and set it up. So there's 6 main modes. You have Session Mode, Note Mode, Chord Mode, there's a Custom Mode, a Sequencer, and Projects. I'm going to stick with Session Mode for this video, but I will show you a few cool options using this as a MIDI controller in Note Mode as well as Chord Mode. So in Session Mode, you'll see there's really 2 different versions of this. If you click on the Session button, you'll see there's one where these outer lights are lit up and one where the lights are dimmed. In this mode, with these outer lights dimmed, you can simply just trigger each of your cells in your live loop session. Then simply press the cell again to stop playback. If I click on Session again, you'll see these outer lights come back in. On the bottom, these are our individual scene triggers. So if you want to trigger a whole scene rather than individual cells, you can do this here as well. And these will trigger based on the quantized start setting you have up here. So I usually like to keep this on 1 bar. Unfortunately, I don't think there's really any way to stop playback from the LAUNCHPAD for a whole scene. So you still have to press spacebar to stop playback, and then press Command Return to reset all of the cells. What I like to do when I'm working with live loops is create a short 8-bar loop in the tracks area. This just sort of wrangles the playhead and keeps it from, going off really far in the tracks area, and it can also help when triggering scenes and cells. So I just like to keep that on. It's just something to keep in mind and just keep in the background. You'll notice there are these control surface bars on the left of some of these tracks and at the bottom of some of these scene triggers. This is showing you what is actually in view on the LAUNCHPAD. You can use the navigation arrows to move up and down, or use them to move left and right. So if you have a larger live loop session that has more than 8 tracks or more than 8 scenes, you can use this to navigate to whatever cell or scene you like. One thing I want to point out is that if you have cells in momentary playback mode, for example, if I right click on a cell, go down to playback, then go to play mode, if I set this to momentary, I'll do this for a couple of these. In order to play these, I'm going to have to hold down the cells. And when I release the cells, they stop playback. Whereas if these are on start-stop mode, you just have to press them once to play and then press them again to stop. And again, regardless of whether you're using momentary or start-stop, these follow your quantize start option. Now, if you don't like the idea of having to use your keyboard on your computer to stop and start playback, one workaround that I found works pretty well is just create a blank scene either as like your first scene or your last scene, and you can use this as a stop scene. And then you can use that scene as a stopping point. Playback is still happening, and you can jump back in whenever you like. So that's just a quick workaround that I've found works really well. I usually just make my very first scene a blank scene, and that's my stop scene, so I don't have to keep pressing the spacebar on my computer. This is particularly helpful if you're using this for live performance, where you want to stay away from working at your computer and stay in front of the control surface. You can select different tracks by clicking on these buttons on the right here. And then at the bottom, there are some additional controls for different parameters, different track parameters. So you have record arm. We'll come back to that one in a moment. But this next one is mute. So there's two different ways you can do this. You can either hold the mute button and select the tracks that you actually want to mute. Click on those again to unmute them. Or you can press the mute button. You'll see it stays a blue-green color. Then select the tracks that you want to mute. Then press mute again to turn off the mute function. Then to unmute these, press it again. Unmute the tracks, then press mute again. Personally, I find that I just like to hold mute, select the tracks I want muted. I find this is a bit quicker way. The solo button is the same. You can either press it and then select the tracks that you want to solo, or you can hold the solo button and select tracks, and then do the same to unsolo those tracks. You can adjust the volume of any of the tracks in your live loop session. So you can do this just by clicking and swiping. Or if you want to make fine adjustments, you can just click on a pad. And there's actually 4 different levels of dimness. So you can see a really dim pad, a little brighter, and then full brightness. So this is helpful for dialing in, smaller, more minute volume changes. You can also adjust the pan of any of the tracks. So when you see 2 buttons right together, right in the middle, that means that the track is center. So let me play a couple of these keyboards at the bottom here. And then to go back to center, once again, you just click the 2 pads right in the center. I'm going to press X to pull up my mixer to see this next one. You can actually control the first send on each track by clicking this sends button here. And then you can roll in the send amount. So if you've got an effect on each of these tracks that you want to control over time, for me, my bus 1 here is going to a delay effect. So I can control the amount of delay on each of these tracks in real time. In the last 2, we have device tempo and stop clip. Device tempo, I don't believe does anything for Logic. I haven't been able to figure out what it does in Logic, so I don't think that does anything for Logic. Again, keep in mind, this controller was developed initially for Ableton Live, so any use we get out of it in Logic is sort of riding off of that development, so you're going to find that there are buttons that don't do anything in Logic. Including this last button, stop clip. We don't use the word clip in Logic. We use the word region or cell. However, this does do something. If you want to stop playback on a whole track, rather than just selecting the individual cells, that's what this is helpful for. So you'll notice when you press this, all these buttons, all the track buttons here, will light up. So when they're not lit up, if I start playing a few of these cells, I can stop the track playback from these track buttons rather than having to press the specific cell. You can also record MIDI using the LAUNCHPAD. So I've got Retro Synth pulled up here, just the stock patch. You can select a cell that you want to record to, and then simply click on that cell to start recording. Now, this isn't really going to do me any good unless I have my metronome enabled, so I'll go ahead and enable my metronome for recording. The other thing I'm going to do is go up to File, go down to Project Settings, and go to Recording. And here I'm going to set a count in of 2 bars. I'm doing this on purpose because I want to make sure I have enough time to prepare, because I'm going to have to quickly switch from session mode to note mode in order to record anything. So I want to give myself enough time to do that. And then you press spacebar to stop recording. So I have this cell I just recorded pulled up in the piano roll editor here. If you select that cell and then press the quantize button, it'll automatically quantize all of the notes to 16th notes. So that's a cool way to just really quickly quantize right after recording. Now, if you have an empty cell selected, but the track is not armed, if you just click on that cell on the LAUNCHPAD, nothing's going to happen. So you either need to arm that track, then click on the cell to record, or if you want to avoid using the mouse, you can click on the Record Arm button down here, select the track that you want to arm, then click on the cell to record. Another way to do this that sort of does everything all at once is you click on a cell. Even if the track is not armed, you can click on this Capture MIDI button right here, and it'll automatically arm the track and record to the cell. If you want to clear a cell, make sure that cell is selected, then just press clear on the LAUNCHPAD. And if you just select the track and press clear, you can actually clear the whole track as well. So those are the main functions for using the LAUNCHPAD in session mode as a control surface. Now, if you use some of these other modes like note mode, chord mode, or the sequencer, you're just using it as a MIDI controller. You're not using it as a control surface. However, I want to show you a couple cool features in note and chord mode that are particularly useful. So in note mode, you're essentially just using the LAUNCHPAD as a MIDI controller. So you can just play in notes like any other MIDI controller. Now, by default in LAUNCHPAD, mine looks like this, and the pink keys are Cs. So this one's C1, C2, C3, C4, and so forth and so on. Now, by default, the way my lights are arranged are in a C minor scale. However, there's several different ways you can customize this. If you click on this Shift key, if you hold it, then click on Note, it'll bring you to this different view. Now, this view can be pretty confusing unless you go read the manual, but basically there's 4 main things here I want you to pay attention to. The first is this upper button in the upper right. This turns on or off scale mode. So when you're not in scale mode, when this is red, if you click on Note again, you're going to see all of the notes in the chromatic scale. And I should also mention that you can use the up and down arrows here to move up an octave or down an octave. So I'll hold Shift again and click on Note mode. I'll turn on scale mode. Let's see what happens now. You can see that each row is essentially a whole minor scale. So we're skipping all of the notes that are not within the C minor scale. I'll hold Shift again, click Note again. The next thing I want you to pay attention to are these 5 orange keys up here. These have to do with the layout of the keys. So if you click this first one, you'll see that each vertical row is an octave, a different octave of that scale. So So essentially moving up and down just moves you up an octave. So some people might find that helpful. Then if you click on these next 4, what happens is it offsets the keys. So here everything's being offset by 2 keys, by 2 pads. If I choose the next one, they're all offset by 3 pads. And the next one, they're all offset by 4 pads. Personally, I like to work with this last one here. And I normally actually like to work with scale mode off. However, scale mode can be really helpful, especially if you're not like super familiar with music theory. Maybe you don't know all of your scales and keys, and you want to be able to work within a minor key or a major key, and you don't want to have to know the theory behind it. So the next 2 sections I want you to pay attention to are these 2 rows and these 2 rows. These 2 bottom rows here allow you to select between 16 different scales. This very first one is natural minor, and this one is major. So look up top here, like in major, for example. If you think of C major scale, it's all white keys, right? So if you think about these top two showing you the configuration of notes on a piano, this would be like C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, C. If you think about it like that. So it's showing you the configuration of the scale. So here, like C minor would be C, D, E flat, F, G, A flat, B flat. But if I want to switch to C major instead, I can very easily do that. Or again, I can switch back to natural minor. And then with any of those scales, you can adjust the offset or the configuration of how they're set up on the keyboard. So mainly I'm just using, minor or major here, but you can also change the root. Remember how I said by default all of the pink notes are C's? Well, you can actually change that. Let's say I want to work in the key of E minor, right? So if you're thinking C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, if I select E as my root, then go back to note mode, now each of the pink keys are E. So there's a lot of different ways you can configure this. Typically what I do is I turn scale mode off because I like to see all of my notes chromatically, and then I'll just choose what root I want, either minor or major. So if I'm working in a song that's in, say, G major, I'll select G and then the major key, and now all of my G's are pink, but all of the notes in the G major scale are outlined. So it takes a bit of getting used to. It's definitely not something you're just going to pick up really quickly, but the more you use the Launchpad, the more you get used to this format. Originally, I was thinking about buying a small format keyboard just for my desk, but I found that I can get away with just using the Launchpad for pretty much everything. It's functioning as both my MIDI controller and as my control surface for live loops. One last thing I want to show you that's really cool is the Chord Mode. This is an incredible tool for help with harmony and songwriting. So what this does is whatever scale you picked in the note mode, so I picked C minor. If I go to Chord Mode, this vertical row of orange buttons will play each of the diatonic triads in the key. And it sort of condenses them into an inversion that's the most compact. Now, in addition to that, you have individual chord tones right here for each of these. So if you just press the first 3, you're getting a triad. So you're getting a root, a fifth, and a third. So they're in root position, but the third is just up an octave. If you want to add an extra fifth, you can add this fifth note here. And if you want to juice up your chords a bit and add some sevenths, this row will add the appropriate diatonic seventh for each of the chords. This pink button in the lower right functions like a sustain pedal, so you can play a chord, then press the sustain pedal button, and the chord will ring out. And just like using note mode, you can change what set of chords are here by changing the key. So you can do this by pressing Shift Note or Shift Chord. It'll take you to the same screen. So maybe instead of C minor, I want to work in F minor. I'll choose F as my root, go back to chord. And then I get a completely new set of chords based on a different key. So that's an overview of using the LaunchPad Pro as both a control surface and a MIDI controller in Logic Pro 10. If you spent your whole life playing on keyboard controllers, it definitely takes a bit of getting used to, but you'll get used to it quicker than you think. I'm pretty much using my LaunchPad full time now as my main MIDI controller at my desk, rather than using my keyboard controller. Again, unless I'm playing something that's in a keyboard style, I'm not using my keyboard for it anymore. I'm just using the LaunchPad. Once again, don't forget about the Mac Pro Video subscription giveaway. All you have to do is click on the link in the video description and sign up for a free account. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for the support, and thanks for watching.